I didn't just write one first class dissertation or two first class dissertations. I actually wrote 3 first class dissertations. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is Emma. I'm a Cambridge University graduate and I obtained a first class English literature degree. Now that wasn't just a brag. I'm sort of starting off the video with that bit of background information because, as you can see from the title, this is a video on how to achieve a first class in your dissertation, or my tips and tricks for doing well in your dissertation, planning your dissertation. I'm obviously no authority on writing dissertations, but I didn't just write one first class dissertation or 2 first class dissertations. I actually wrote 3 first class dissertations during my time at Cambridge. So I'd like to say that I have picked up some tips and tricks along the way, and I've definitely learned from the mistakes I've made, and I'd like to share those with you guys so you don't make the same mistakes that I did. Now again, because I come from an English literature background, this video will probably be more useful for arts and humanities subjects, but I think the general planning tips could be used for anybody. With that said, let's get started. So I've broken this video up into different sections that relate to the different steps of writing a dissertation, from literally picking a topic to submitting your dissertation. So step 1, you need to make sure you pick the right topic. I think the key to writing a first class dissertation is definitely picking a first class topic, and that will sort of set you up for what you're going to write ahead. So what do I mean by picking a first class topic? You need to pick a topic that definitely has the breadth and depth to write something new and interesting and exciting, and chances are your dissertation might be 10,000 words long, and if you don't have a topic that's deep enough or interesting enough, you're not going to hit that word limit. So you definitely need to pick something where there isn't a lot of writing out there on this topic, so there's definitely a space for some new research, or maybe a topic where there is a lot of conversation going on but you've got something new to add to the discourse that nobody's looked at before. You need to make sure you're coming at it from a really interesting and new perspective. So how do you pick a first class topic? My first tip, which probably relates more to arts and humanities students, is to maybe narrow it down based on your interests. So maybe pick a favourite author, or a favourite time period, or a favourite book, or maybe 1, 2 or 3 books that you think, yes, I really want to narrow down and look at these pieces of text or this specific author, because that will definitely help you when you're researching the different materials that are out there to really fine-tune what you want to look at. If you're not sure what kind of author or time period or topic you're interested in, then it might be good to go and look at your university website's reading lists, or any other reading list you can find online. So for me, I kind of knew I was interested in the medieval period, I knew I was interested in language, rhythm, meter, so I looked up lots of different reading lists that had recommended texts to fit those topics. Obviously that's still quite vast, and I was struggling to narrow it down to which text I wanted to look at specifically. So it might be worth going onto your university website and looking up professors that specialise in these topics. So I actually ended up emailing a professor directly who specialised in what I was interested in and said, look, I really want to write a dissertation in this field, but I'm not sure what's out there. I haven't read everything that's out there and I don't have the time to do that before I pick my topic. Can you recommend something where that you might think there's a gap, or you think there isn't enough writing on this, or nothing new being said recently? And this professor got back to me and he recommended a bunch of texts, which narrowed down my search even further, so I could go through, read snippets of these texts, not all of them, and pick the exact text and topic that I wanted to write on, which was super useful. Another tip for picking the right topic would be to look at essays that are already out there to work out what is already being said about your text. Maybe this will come after you've sort of narrowed it down to a topic or an era or a book or an author. But definitely read essays that are already out there to hear what's being said, historical arguments, and look in the footnotes. The footnotes in the bibliography are a really good way of following the discourse, seeing which critics are engaging with who and what they have to say and how they respond to each other, and from there you can start to build out what you need to look at or you want to look at. Step 2 is planning. Now, it's so important to get a calendar up or your diary up and mark out when that dissertation deadline is, and from there work backwards and think, I need to get all of my reading done in 1 month. I need to get all of my planning done in 2 weeks. I need to get all of my writing done in 2 months. I need to get my second draft done in 2 months. And you can block it out in chunks. Obviously, these are just examples and hypothetical, but if you block it out like that, it's easier to be strict with yourself and say, right, I'm going to stop researching now. I've read enough. I could keep reading and reading and reading because there's an unlimited amount of texts that are out there on this topic, but I need to stop now and get on to writing. My next tip is to keep a Word doc or a spreadsheet of all of the interesting critical essays or primary texts that you want to go away and read so you don't forget about them. And then you can use this spreadsheet or document as a way of tracking which texts you have read and what you want to read next. Again, if you go to the footnotes and the bibliographies and you find more text, more engagement, you can track that in your spreadsheet, track which critics are engaging with who, and then you can go away and keep up to date with that argument and see what's new to be published, what's already out there, and get a really full understanding of the critical debate. And my next tip is to just get writing. If you start writing snippets of analysis now, maybe you might pick a paragraph out that you're really interested in, or a stanza, or a text specifically, or a critical quotation that you think is interesting, and if you just start writing, then you can see if you've got a lot to say about it. And I actually think this is a really useful step to evaluate whether you've got enough material to work from. And in the end, these snippets that I wrote in my initial planning and research phase ended up making their way into my final dissertation that I submitted, so it even gets you that one step ahead of the writing process from this very early stage. I think this is also a really good way of evaluating whether your topic is too broad or too niche. You need to get the right balance. If you pick a topic that's too broad, you're going to have a really hard time narrowing down your ideas. But if you pick something too niche, then maybe you won't have a great deal to say about this topic, and there won't be a lot of critics out there to engage with on this topic. Now, step 3 is the writing stage. Now, this is arguably the hardest part because it's so easy to just sit with your laptop and think, where do I even start? And my best bit of advice for this would be, don't limit yourself to writing it chronologically necessarily. As I said before, with writing these snippets of interesting paragraphs and analyses, sometimes the first thing that catches your eye won't necessarily be the first thing you want to argue. It won't necessarily be your introduction. It might be the main bulk of your analysis. So I definitely started by just writing about what caught my interest first, and that's a really good way of beating the sort of writer's block that you might feel you have when you begin to start writing your dissertation. In terms of the organization side of things, you might also be balancing other things at the same time as writing your dissertation. So it's really important to block out a specific amount of time to do all of this writing, because trust me, there will be a lot, and it will take a lot more time than you might think it will take in the beginning. So say I'm balancing other pieces of work from my course, lectures, seminars with writing my dissertation. I might say to myself, look, there are 7 days in the week. Every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday will be my dissertation days. Whether that's research or writing or redrafting and editing, I will always make sure that those 3 days are reserved for writing my dissertation. And this doesn't just have to be specific days like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but even simply saying, I will always make sure to do 2 to 3 days in the week on my dissertation, regardless of which days they are. I'll just look for a space in my timetable that seems relatively free that I can really give it my all. And I think personally, I found it a lot easier to write my dissertation when I blocked it out like this, rather than trying to find an odd hour here and there in the day. It's definitely easier to just sit down and go full steam ahead and absorb yourself in it, and that's when I think your ideas flow the best, rather than when you're picking it up in bits and not really engaging with it fully. It's definitely easier to be absorbed and in the dissertation bubble, I suppose. Now to the structure of the essay or the dissertation. I would definitely say don't put pressure on yourself to find the argument straight away. This kind of links to my earlier point about not having to start with the introduction, but chances are your argument won't come together until the very end. Once you've gathered all of your research and gathered everything you have to say, that's when you can go away and look for your argument. For now, it's just about writing and writing and writing and gathering all of your resources. So definitely don't try and pin down what you're trying to say at this early stage. It's just restrictive. I think leaving yourself open means you can find an argument you weren't necessarily looking for, and you can sort of track patterns or find patterns in the materials you have, rather than saying, I definitely want to write about the way women were oppressed in these texts, because by the time you get to the end of it, you might think, actually, I was trying to shoehorn in an argument about the oppression of women, when actually these texts give way to the empowerment of women instead, and that was really surprising for me. So definitely don't restrict yourself to a specific argument now. Now, I'd say for finding your argument, this obviously, I've said this will come nearing the end of the process, but if you're still struggling to work out what you're actually arguing, which is totally okay, by the way, then a really good way of working out your argument is to get all of these little paragraphs that you've written at the start and maybe print them all out or get them all on separate pages in a Word doc, and just practice moving them around in different orders and looking for patterns across these different paragraphs and thinking, what jumps out to me? Where's the logical flow of these paragraphs? And once you start to work out where bits of text slot in like a jigsaw piece, you can start to piece together your argument, and maybe your starting argument might be different to where you end, and you might find something that contradicts what you've said, or an anomaly that like what sort of reroutes your argument somewhere else. So I think this is a really good way of just getting a bird's eye view of all of your information and then slowly piecing it together rather than trying to force it into a certain direction. And once you've worked out this order, you can then start adding in your filler phrases and your comparative phrases and making these connections, and then going back and re-editing the paragraphs you already have in a way that makes sense and flows logically and draws really interesting, insightful comparisons about your chosen topic. So definitely at this point, it's a really good chance to repurpose your material. That doesn't mean get rid of what you have completely, but also don't just stick pieces together and forget to connect them, because it will be really obvious if you've made a big patchwork of all of your paragraphs and they just don't quite fit. So definitely don't be afraid to cut huge chunks out, rewrite new chunks, move the order around again and again and again until you get that perfect order and that perfect argument that you've been looking for. So step 4 is about editing. The best tip that I can give about editing or redrafting your dissertations is to stop looking at it, stop reading it. Don't open the document. If you can afford to spare a couple of days, a couple of weeks, or even a couple of months, which I managed to do because I'm quite punctual and got all of the writing done quite early on, please just take a step back and don't look at it, because it's so much better when you come back at it with fresh eyes and you say, that argument doesn't make sense. I don't know what I was saying there, and these paragraphs actually don't work well together as I thought they did. And I think this is a good way of like coming back with clear eyes, clear perspective, and coming back to your dissertation as a stranger to try and work out if the examiner or the audience that are reading your dissertation will actually understand what you've written. It's very easy to assume that it makes sense when you've been living inside of your dissertation for weeks and months, but taking this step back can really help you see it from a fresh perspective. At this point, it's also really helpful to ask yourself, how am I contributing to the critical debate? What have I got to say? What am I adding that's new? And if you're still not sure of your argument, this might definitely help you focus in on what you really want to say. Remember, each paragraph is a chance to advance your argument, so it's really important that you get this right and you make sure that with every new paragraph you're contributing something new, and you need to be brutal and ruthless and say, is this contributing anything to my argument? No, it's not. I like what I have to say, but it's just not relevant. Get rid. There's no point in hoarding your paragraphs if they don't really contribute to your argument and they're just sort of a weird diversion from what you're trying to say. And this will also help you to focus your own ideas as well. Obviously, you don't always have to be adding something new. Sometimes it is enough just to be adding something interesting, but make sure you're not repeating what's already out there. You're not going to get originality marks for simply copying somebody else's ideas. And obviously you need to be very wary of things like plagiarism. Obviously at university they have a huge database of all the texts that have ever been out there, and they can check to see if you just copied somebody else. And you can plagiarize ideas, so definitely be careful not to repeat existing material. And step 5 is referencing. I know everybody hates referencing. It's really tricky and it takes a lot of time and it can be unnecessarily stressful for what you think isn't that important compared to the content of your dissertation, but getting your referencing right could be the difference between you getting a 2-1 and a first. So I definitely think you should sit down and at least dedicate one whole day to going through all of your references, all of your bibliography, and making sure you've got all of the information you need. And my best tip for doing this is don't leave it until the last minute. Make sure you keep a bank or a database or a spreadsheet of all of your texts that you've used, all of the resources you've used from day 1. Make sure you write everything down, either in a notebook or online, and make sure you keep that safe, because there is no greater pain than being like, I can't remember what the page span was for this chapter I've read, and trying to hunt it down in the library and re-familiarize yourself with it when you might have read it months and months and months ago before the submission date. So my biggest tip to you is don't leave it too late, get started as soon as possible. My next tip about referencing is definitely download a referencing software. So the software that we used at Cambridge in the English department was called Zotero, and this is like a little add-in that you can add to your browser. So whenever you go on a website or you're reading a PDF or maybe an ebook, this little Zotero icon will flash up and say, I've detected a book that needs referencing, and if you click this, it will automatically take the reference for that book and store it in the application, and then you can just right click, copy it and paste it into your Word doc where your dissertation is. And this was so useful. Obviously it doesn't always get it right, so you need to make sure you're checking your references. Definitely read over your referencing guidelines again and again and again. Make sure you know about the silly things like where spaces should go, if you need a full stop or a comma, and definitely check. But Zotero or other referencing softwares are so great for writing your dissertation because it definitely makes sure they're all stored in one place, and it kind of does the hard work for you. So those are all the tips that I have to give you guys today. I hope going forward that you can learn from the mistakes that I made, where I've forgotten to write down my references, or I couldn't narrow down my topic well enough, or I spent too long sitting at a blank computer screen and not just getting writing. And I hope this can help you in your first steps to writing a dissertation. So best of luck to everybody writing a dissertation right now or whenever you're watching this video, and let me know in the comments below what you're writing on. I'd definitely be really interested to hear. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.